that we do have. Um, well, China has a different version too. I had mentioned yesterday briefly their education system and the honor aspect of it. But the other thing too, oh, this was the haircuts. I found an official photo of all the haircuts available. I think I was able to show that to you guys yesterday. So girls, you have 18 possible choices, and guys, you have 10 possible choices for your haircuts. That's all that's allowed. All right. We got to this, and we talked about the idea that the command system is pretty much the opposite of a free market system. Why are we eating in classroom? This is something before school or after school or lunch. Okay, let's go ahead and wrap that back up. Okay. um, so again, the antithesis, the opposite of what a free system would look like. I mentioned market socialism yesterday in regards to closer to a free market system, but you still have a lot more taxes. So I mentioned my brother lived in Europe. France at one point when he was getting a paycheck there, he was making 90,000, but he only saw 30. Right, so 30,000 because he 100% of his income was 60,000. He would see half of it, so 50% automatically taxed, and then 30%. I'm sorry, the other 30,000. He said his employer had to pay into the unemployment system in France to have an employee. So whatever the taxes were, the employer had to match in regards to other taxation. The one thing he said was everything's basically paid for over there. So you do get free healthcare, you do get access to a lot of this stuff. But does anybody know what Crohn's is by any chance? It's an intestine. Your body basically fights itself. It's autoimmune. So my brother has Crohn's, and there's a medicine here in the U.S. called Remicade that he can take. I think it's once a month or once every other month. That you take and helps kind of keep the inflammation down. Yada yada yada. U.S. he was able to afford it. France would not use that medicine. So because the national medicine wouldn't allow it, he couldn't get it. So he had to literally fly home, get it in the U.S. and then fly back. So he'd come home every month for like a couple days just for the Remicade treatment. But that's because it's a nationalized system. It may have changed over the years, but again, the government controls all of that. Now he's in the Netherlands now, and they have a similar system, but in the Netherlands, this is where that market system kind of kicks back in. The government still taxes at a high rate, but you can supplement it. If you want to add, like, pay more than what the government's going to give you as the minimum, you can get a better situation. So, like when my niece was born, they could have been in a room with four other women while they were waiting to have a baby, or pay more and get your own room, pay more and get more services. Right. So, I just touched on a little bit some of the things that I witnessed when I was over there. It really, I was waiting for it to be very, very different than the U.S., but it really wasn't. It was just smaller. Everything was there, just a little bit less than what we currently see. A lot more specialized stores too, like fish shops, bakeries. Like you did have your big stores, like their big store though. Who here knows the Marks in Brunswick, the old one, not the new one? That was like the size of their big store. That's kind of like their WalMarts. Like it has everything in it, but that's as big as it really got. So it really wasn't huge. And then a couple different foods that I came across I thought were interesting. But in regards to paying for things in the U.S., I'm not sure if I mentioned the water thing yesterday. I mentioned water. That if you ever go out to eat, you don't get free water. You have to pay for water. So if you want, and then they also provide you is it still or sparkling? So you can get one, right, or you can get both. But if you wanted another bottle, they'd have to pay for a whole other bottle of water. Soda in the U.S. pretty much free refills if you buy one. It's like $3, $4, but you get as many as you want. Versus in Europe, my mom had this experience in France. I had it in the Netherlands. Every pop you buy individual pops. So you don't buy one and get free refills. It's constant. And then to go into restaurants, you can't just go in and use the bathrooms. Anyone ever done that where you just sneak into the bathroom and you have to buy something or you have to be a customer, right? Or you have to pay, because that was the one thing too. I had to pay to use bathrooms in Europe, which is really kind of strange. When I visited Amsterdam, they do have an area where it's legalized marijuana, which everyone potentially knows that that's the legalization of marijuana over there. And we kind of, in a lot of the states in the U.S. use that as their example of how to legalize it, but they've actually been having issues with it. So now When you smoke weed in Amsterdam, you have to be in certain locations. Like you can't be walking on the street smoking weed. Has anyone ever been to Put in Bay? If you're ever going to Put in Bay, you're allowed to drink in the bars, but you're not supposed to be allowed to drink on the streets while walking around. Right? In the bar, good. On the street, no. So same thing with weed in Amsterdam. And then they have coffee shops and cafes. So if you want to go to a cafe, that's where you get your coffee and your scones and all those other things. But if you go to a coffee shop, now you're looking at the weed stuff. The amount of stores that were selling weed was kind of a lot. It was really kind of funny. Like every street had at least one store. And then they had weed ice cream. You name it. They had weed suckers, weed popsicles, weed chewing gum. You name it, they put weed in it.
So where should you try?
What's that? I actually didn't. I've never done drugs, honestly. It's good claims, right? So, communism. This is where we get a little more strict in the socialism realm, right? So, socialism, again, I mentioned yesterday, was like the overarching, big picture idea. However, when you look at communism, communism gets the government a lot more involved and a lot more say in all of its aspects of your life, right? So, and we're talking more of a Soviet Union, Cuba as an example. North Korea really kind of goes beyond communism; it's almost exactly a dictatorship. But with communism, it derives everything from Karl Marx. And I had mentioned the two major names you'll hear in economics are Karl Marx and Adam Smith. Adam Smith, all about do what you want, self-interest, make sure you're happy and everyone else benefits from that. Okay, Karl Marx looked at the whole thing and said, "Wait a second. This is where you kind of hear the capitalist pigs comment from sometimes people who are more socialist or communist, more so communist than socialist." Was why is it? And when I say this out loud, it's going to kind of make sense. Why is it these big wigs are making these billions of dollars, and yet these workers in the factory are working their butts off and just making hourly minimums? That's not right. Right? Why are they getting all this money and the workers aren't? Right. So you start to hear about the proletariat versus the bourgeoisie. I think a more recent phrase that you guys may have heard is bougie, right, which for those who aren't aware, it comes from bourgeoisie. Like the bougie, the bourgeoisie, or the super wealthy, the kings, the queens, the czars. Why is it they're getting this? Just because they're royalty? That's not fair. We need to make sure we take care of the proletariats, the working class. You also may have heard the Bolshevik Revolution with Lenin and Stalin and all of that. Okay, actually, more Lenin and Stalin came across after. But that was the idea behind Marx. Marx believed that all the value should be from the labor force, not the owners of these companies, not the kings and queens. So he wanted to flip it all on its end and say, listen, the government needs to take all of that, control it, and equally distribute it amongst all the people according to their profession. Right? So if you're a factory worker, you're not going to make as much as the doctors, but all the doctors will make the same. All the factories will make the same. All of the bus drivers will make the same. Everyone should be evenly taken care of. Right? And that's kind of where you start to see the communist aspect with the military backing it. So you have a couple comparisons here. With communism and socialism, you have these variations. The only thing that they agree on is the even distribution of wealth and centralizing that economic power. Socialism looks at it from a bigger range. It's kind of a big overarching, whereas communism gets a little bit more on the specific side. Who in here remembers by any chance I always take a pause on the beginning because I forget the name. Why am I drawing a blank now? It's the family that was killed in the Bolshevik Revolution. The Tsar. Oh, come on.
Oh, the Russian.
Yes.
Like
Catherine. Why am I drawing a blank now? Come on. Oh, I can do this.
Isn't it the Romanovs?
Thank you very much. The Romanovs. Did you say that a couple seconds ago and I missed it? Yeah, the Romanov family. So there was a couple different background stories that I thought were just intriguing stories, kind of sad and depressing a little bit, but interesting. So near the beginning of the Bolshevik Revolution, Lenin and the forces of the working class basically rose up and tried to kill off the Romanov family. The fear was that if the Romanov family survived in the future, they might be able to come back and claim the throne again. So you guys may have heard the story of Anastasia, and there's been cartoons about her. I think in the 70s, they found someone that looked like Anastasia Romanov, and they thought,
There was a woman who escaped from a mental asylum who went around claiming to be
there
her
we go.
because she looked slightly like
Yeah.
her.
Mhm.
And then they
They
figured
were
out
able to
that she
prove
wasn't.
that she was not, yeah. But that was for a while there. There was this nervous, like, oh my gosh, someone survived. And of course, it wasn't even Disney. It was another cartoon they had with the little red dragon. The lead was her. Kind of had a good dragon there, but trying to get her back into power in the cartoon. Anyways, all that to say that they killed off the family in order to keep them from claiming the wealth and the rulership of the of Russia. Now, one of the sad stories near the beginning of this revolution was they literally found one of the families, the Romanov families, and lined them up in the basement, and basically just mowed them down with guns. And sadly, all of the men quickly died right away, and a lot of the women and children, however, survived the first volley of fire. And so they had to go up to them and shoot them basically in the heads. They found out that the reason they had survived the first volley of bullets was because they had sewn into their clothing all of the family jewels and made accidentally makeshift bulletproof vests. And so they ended up killing him regardless, but yeah, it's just one of those little
They
weird.
made the Tsar watch while they shot his wife and kids.
This was also around the time of, I'm drawing a blank. It's probably because I haven't talked about it for 4 months, 5 months. Come on. Rasputin was also in this era, right? So the fun story of Rasputin. Do you remember how many times it was like 3 or 4 times they thought he was dead? They strangled him,
Strangled him,
Shot
poisoned,
him,
stabbed him.
drowned him. I can't remember which one actually made it happen.
The drowning.
Was
Yeah,
it
it
the
was
drowning
the
one?
drowning,
It was
'cause
the last one.
It was like on top of the poison, I think.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
That's why
And
sometimes
shooting him too.
Yeah. that's why you
Poisoned him,
sometimes
shot him and then drowned him.
you'll see him as the bad guy. Like anybody remember Hellboy, the very very first one? The bad guy was Rasputin. Because the fun part of the story was that he had survived even all of those, and he was still able to. So, socialism tends to be for the lack of a better term, the nicer version. Right? Communism tends to be a lot more government rule, government authoritarian, a lot more control of your lives. You don't tend to see as much individual choice in the communist system. Right? So, when you look at the history here, you have what they call the Reign of Terror, where they murder the families. Beginning of the Soviet Union. The one thing you start to see with the Soviet Union is they, rather than letting the economy figure out where the money should go, the government controlled every aspect of it. So they would either push it towards one thing or push it to another. So when you look at the economic weakness aspect, this is where C, D, and E come in. They literally would just shift where they needed the money. So you could be doing super, super well with your farm, and they would be helping you out, providing you assistance. And then the next month, they'd be like, yeah, we got to put more money over into the military. So we're going to take all the money we were giving to you and put it over there. And so then all of a sudden, the farms would start to dwindle, and family agriculture would start to struggle. And then they would put it into consumer goods and the factories and making more parts and making more of these things. And then they would go, okay, we got to take money from there and move it over here. So they wouldn't let the economy figure it out. The government kept on adjusting and shifting. During the space race, which was in the U.S. versus another form of the Cold War, getting to the moon. Has anyone by any chance seen the the Apple rendition on Apple TV of the Soviets beating the U.S. to the moon? I think it's it may have even called the Man on the Moon or something like that. It was very, very good. I only watched 2 episodes. I got to go back to it. But the whole thing was, what if the Soviets made it to the moon? And the U.S. was trying to catch up with them. It was pretty good. I think the last episode I watched, the U.S. was trying to catch up with them, and they were going to make a U.S. space station. That was the next big thing. And then they had a woman cosmonaut land on the moon. And so it was one of those things where the U.S. was like, crap, they beat us again. It'd be interesting to look at. But going back to the space race, that was a big one for a while. All the money was going over there, so they pulled it from everything else. But the problem is, as a person living in that society, when the government doesn't give you assistance, you end up stuck, right? You don't get anywhere near as much things as you need. I think I may have mentioned a guy I knew from Poland, communist Poland. Did I ever tell you the watermelon story? So his mom worked for like the mayor of the city that they lived in Poland, and they found out the watermelons were being shipped the next day. So him and his brother, or his mom, knew what time they were coming in, and his mom was given a special voucher for a second watermelon. Otherwise, you have to get in line, and you have to only get one. So him and his brother went out to where it was supposed to be delivered. What time they got there, like an hour early, just in case anyone else found out about it. And they were standing there waiting. Behind them was this massive long line of people waiting for the watermelons. He said the truck pulled in. It was one of those trucks with the wood sides to it, nothing fancy at all. And all the watermelons were stacked up in a big, huge mound of watermelons. And him and his brother got the first two from the guy in the truck. He just picked one up and gave it to him, and that was it. And then they left. But he said he had a friend who was near the end of the line, and when he got to the watermelons, just imagine gravity, right? The bottom watermelons would be squished. So he said his friend got a half a watermelon and some pieces of a watermelon given to him, and that was his watermelon, and that was it. And there was nothing special about it. It was whatever. And then people who were behind them, once the watermelons ran out, that was it. That's all we got for you. So same thing was happening with bread. You might hear the history of bread lines, and toilet paper was another one. You get like 2 rolls of toilet paper, and that was it. You have to last until the next delivery. Right? And this is because the government was saying, no, this is all you need. Nope, this is all you need. Nope, this is all you need. There was no, like if you guys go to Walmart and you see people scanning stuff, every time you buy something in the system, it sends a note to Walmart's Supercenter storage place and says, hey, we need 5 more of these. We're down to this many. So there's an automatic shipment set up and ready to go. This system, not so much. The other one that you see a lot of with this is China, right? One of the things with China in the 1950s to 70s, when it was under Mao, he had tried to make everything equal. Again, more of a communist idea in regards to farming. So what he did was he took all the small farmers and gave them parcels of land from the big farmers. And the big farmers took land away from them to give it to the small farmers. And basically said, okay, you're all responsible for this. And in the end, they lost agriculture. They lost the product that they were supposed to be getting. What they realized was the small farmers didn't know how to farm as much land. And the big farmers had no problem farming their land out because they had less. But the big farmers started finding out that the little farmers were getting paid just as much as they were. So what do you think the big farmers did with their production? Yeah, they didn't worry as much, right? They didn't rush around to finish up, so they started producing less. So in turn, there was literally less product because everyone was still getting paid the same. There was a professor, I had heard about this a couple years back, who was teaching a course on communism, and he was keeping track of the actual grades on the side. But what he told the class, or actually at one point he gave one of the first quizzes on the communist section, he gave them all the quiz, and they got it back, and everyone, no matter what they got a C, 75%. And everyone was like, but I got all these right. He's like, yes, you did. But I took your extra grades and I gave it to the person who didn't do well, and I bumped them up. So everyone equals out to a C. So we're all at average. What do you think happened to the A students who were working their butts off studying?
They stopped trying.
Yeah, there was a part of them that were like, well, if I'm always going to get that C, I'm always going to get that average, so I'll bring. Inevitably, when you compared the communist scores to the actual scores over the course of, I think it was like a 3 or 4 week chapter, all of the scores started coming down. because you had the high-end students who are trying that realize, well, I'm not really getting anything more. I'm going to, I'm not going to try as hard. So I'm not sure how he finagled into his grade book, but the point that he was trying to show was this is one of the potential issues you have with communism. Yes, everyone's given everything and they're provided for. However, over time, it starts to go away. Like you tend to not see as much attempt at innovation. In the 70s, they changed their whole story and said, okay, we're going to go back to the way we were doing it. We need to make sure we're getting more. And so all of a sudden now these big farmers had their land back. The small farmers were able to keep up and do their thing and provide their part. Over the years, you started seeing China actually move more towards a market system, still with that heavy hand of being able to control anything and everything. My friend, Mr. Manning, who was teaching in China, told me about their schooling system at the time. It's changed since then. But they have, I think it's basically they had basically three tests that you would take: 8th grade, 10th grade, 6th grade, 8th grade, 10th grade. So 6th grade, they would take a test and basically kind of see where everyone was. They would say, okay, you guys, average, pretty good, nothing special, but you're not like struggling. You guys are my middle ground students. We're going to teach you middle ground stuff. Right? If you want to do more, you can go to other schools and get some more educational tutors. You guys did exceptionally well. You guys are kind of like my high level students. We're going to push you towards that area, high level stuff. You guys didn't do so well. We'll try to help you guys out to get to this. And if you guys do well, then we can move you to here. If you guys want to get extra education, you can pay for that on your own. But we'll leave it. So we have the middle, the high level, and the low level right there. So 6th grade. 8th grade, you take another test to kind of see how you've done. You guys did well again. Nothing really changed. However, you did very, very well, and you are now with the higher level group right here. You guys did okay. A couple of you guys got to move up to this middle class, but a couple of you guys struggled just to make ends meet. That's fine. Okay. 10th grade. This was this is our final test. After 10th grade, your life is kind of determined, right? So you guys did well. Sorry, Milo, you didn't do well at the 10th grade test, so you're back into the middle range. However, you guys are going to still be taken care of. We're going to find vocational fields that we need you in. We'll push you in that direction. But the thing is, you don't really get a choice in those. Like, we need you in this field, not in the one you want to be in. So we're going to push you into those fields. You guys are going to be my lawyers, my doctors, my government officials. Your lives are set. We're going to give you cars. We're going to give you houses. We're going to take care of you guys. You guys didn't do so well. We're going to provide you jobs, but it's not going to be high-level thinking jobs. You're probably going to be more sweeping floors, cleaning tables. There actually was at one point a job in China called a spit police. They actually have so much pollution in China that one of the issues that they have is people spitting on the streets. And they're like not just like your normal spit. It's like those really nasty, because they use sulfur sometimes to help burn, to heat things, coal, a lot of coal. So they actually had at one point created a spit police where you would literally go down the streets and ticket people for spitting on the sidewalks. Kind of crazy. Nowadays, it tends to look a little bit more like a normal market system. But again, government still has a lot of control in there. This was one, I think we'll have a little time for this. This was just a fun video I came across in regards to China, because they don't have the same laws as we have. In the US, we have copyright and patent rules. In China, not so much. They get to do pretty much anything they want to.
Copyright infringement doesn't translate